Tonight, Australia is drawn into the war, deploying defence personnel to the Middle East, as 5 women from the Iranian soccer team are granted asylum in Australia. Good evening, I'm Bethanie Alderson. This is ABC News South Australia. Also tonight, SA Labor under fire over patient details sent to media. David Littleproud stands down as leader of the National Party. And the Crows and Power face injury concerns leading into their season openers. Australia has been drawn into the war in the Middle East, deploying 85 ADF personnel to the region tonight to defend against Iranian strikes in the Gulf. The regime, led by its new hardline cleric as supreme leader, has been pounding its neighbours with drone strikes. Australia is now sending help, deploying a long-range reconnaissance aircraft to the UAE to help bolster Gulf countries' defences. As the widening war intensifies, the oil supply shock has hit our shores. The federal government is urging against panic buying of petrol, saying the country has 36 days of fuel in reserve. There's also been a daring escape from the Iranian soccer team, with 5 players granted asylum in Australia at the 11th hour. We'll get the latest from the Middle East and the concerns over oil shortly, but we start our coverage of the war with defence correspondent Tom Lowry.
Fighter jets hunt drones over the beaches of Dubai. Wow. And Bahrainians piece together the aftermath of a deadly strike, as Iran's attacks take a growing toll on its neighbours in the Persian Gulf. It's a conflict that is now drawing Australia in.
This growing wave of dangerous and destabilising attacks from Iran puts civilian lives at risk, of course including Australian lives.
In response to a request for help from the UAE, Australia will send an E-7A Wedgetail surveillance plane and 85 personnel with it, capable of spotting drones and missiles over an area larger than Western Australia, and recently put to use over the skies of Ukraine.
The Wedgetail and supporting Australian Defence Force personnel will be deployed for an initial 4 weeks in support of the collective self-defence of Gulf nations.
We must stand together against a regime like this.
Australia will also send over missiles to help with the increasingly costly task of taking down Iran's cheap, long-range and deadly drones.
Potentially, if this goes on further, Australia should look at what more we could provide in a defensive capacity. We do have a range of capacities, including our fighter aircraft.
Others argue sending weapons to the Gulf will only drag Australia further into the conflict, as the government maintains it will not take offensive action against Iran.
Every military asset we sent into the region is designed to free up another US military asset to be used to kill people in Iran.
The government insists that 2 principles remain firm. Australia will only take defensive action in this conflict, and no boots will be put on the ground in Iran. But if this war continues to escalate, the question becomes whether Australia's involvement escalates with it. Tom Lowry, ABC News, Canberra.
And those Australian personnel and the Wedgetail aircraft will be landing in the UAE overnight. Our Global Affairs editor, Laura Tingle, is there.
Australian forces will be operating from the Gulf by the end of this week. What sets this Middle East war apart is Iran's strategy, targeting neighbouring countries rather than focusing solely on Israeli or US forces. 14 nations have now been drawn into this conflict, defending themselves against waves of Iranian ballistic missiles and drones. Iran's Gulf neighbours are wealthy and well equipped, but they face the same problem as the US and Israel, burning through expensive air defence missiles to knock down cheap Iranian drones. Stockpiles won't last forever, and that's where Australia comes in. Just as it supported Ukraine, Canberra could bolster regional defences with its Wedgetail surveillance aircraft leading the way.
Laura Tingle reporting there. 5 members of the Iranian women's soccer team have been granted humanitarian visas by the Australian government amid grave concerns for their safety. The extraordinary diplomatic operation unfolded over the past 48 hours, and tonight there's a chance more of their teammates could seek asylum. Here's National Affairs correspondent Jane Norman.
A sports team at the centre of a diplomatic firestorm. Iran's Lionesses leave their Gold Coast hotel as supporters desperately try and block their path. 5 of their teammates had staged a daring escape, granted refuge in the dark before dawn.
There were lots of photos, lots of celebrating, and then a spontaneous outbreak of Aussie, 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 oi, oi, oi.
The secret operation unfolded on Sunday. Tony Burke flying to the Gold Coast where the team was playing their final Asian Cup match. Immigration officials at the game conveying a message that help was on offer. On Monday, conversations started in earnest with 5 of the athletes, and that night they escaped, the AFP moving the women to a safe location. The minister returned, and in the early hours of this morning, their visas had been issued.
They're safe here and they should feel at home here.
I understand that it was probably the hardest decision they all had to make.
The women gained global attention last week when they refused to sing their national anthem before their opening match against South Korea. A silent protest labelled an act of wartime treachery on Iranian state TV. As the diplomatic operation unfolded behind the scenes, Donald Trump threw a giant spotlight on it, demanding on social media that Anthony Albanese grant the women asylum. A 2 a.m. phone call to the Prime Minister confirmed Australia already had, prompting the President to post again. He's on it.
I was able to convey to him the action that we'd undertaken.
The fate of their teammates hangs in the balance. One player seen here being led onto the bus to the airport. Concerns officers from Iran's hardline Revolutionary Guard are travelling with them.
We say to them, if you want our help, help is here.
Every reasonable Australian would want a good outcome for their safety and for their future.
Jane Norman, ABC News, Canberra.
The price of oil has started to dip after the US president threatened Iran with fire and fury over the global supply shock. But fears of shortages have seen petrol pumps start to run dry across parts of Australia, as experts warn of the nation's vulnerabilities.
A servo with no petrol running dry in Texas, Queensland.
It's quite stressful. We're not able to give them fuel and they need fuel.
And no joy here in Whyalla in regional Australia either.
Tanks went dry.
Pumps in Victoria's second biggest city are starting to run dry too.
We've got half a tank just in case.
Actually, I am panicked, so I think some people are going to be panicked too.
Trawlers in Queensland docked without diesel.
The 3 major fuel wharves have no fuel for us and they don't know when they can get it.
The global oil supply shock from the widening war has drivers and industries on edge.
The big message for every Australian is don't panic. The suppliers are there.
But supply is clearly being drained, especially in parts of regional Australia.
We've had up to a month's supply go out, leave the system in a matter of a few days.
Experts predict that Australia has 25 days left in reserve.
If we don't get diesel, it'll disable civil society.
The price of diesel has jumped again to $2.30, while unleaded petrol is up to $2.24 in Darwin, with Perth the cheapest at $1.93. After rocketing past $100 a barrel, oil prices have started to drop back down. US President Donald Trump warning Iran that if it doesn't allow oil to flow, it'll hit Tehran 20 times harder.
If Iran does anything to do that, they'll get hit at a much, much harder level. They'll never be able to recover.
There's still oil. It's a supply chain issue, and that directly affects Australia.
We're not just dependent on the Middle East for petrol. Our farmers rely on fertiliser that comes out of the region. Without it, winter crops sown next month could be in jeopardy.
The reality is, in regional communities, they've run out of fuel in these towns. Now, if that happened in a city suburb, they'd be hell to pay.
All of this will push up inflation, from food to petrol pumps, raising the risk of higher interest rates as well. Amelia Turzon, ABC News.
And Donald Trump is sending mixed messages on how long the war could last. The US president initially said the conflict was pretty much complete before arguing there was more to achieve.
A lot of friends, sit down, we have a little time.
Signalling that the war could soon be over.
We took a little excursion because we felt we had to do that to get rid of some evil. And I think you'll see it's going to be a short-term excursion.
While at the same time threatening to escalate the conflict.
We could call it a tremendous success right now as we leave here. I could call it, or we could go further, and we're going to go further.
Donald Trump says he's disappointed with the elevation of Moshtaba Khamenei as Iran's new supreme leader, but won't say whether he'll be targeted like his father was. The son of the assassinated Ayatollah celebrated on the streets of Iran. Death to America, this crowd is chanting. One Iranian sent the ABC a voice note arguing the US and Israeli strikes have sparked a backlash in his country.
Even people who had difficulties with the government, they don't want their children to go to school and not come back. They don't want their hospitals to be bombed.
But another resident insisted the regime still faces fierce opposition.
My friends and I are waiting for any new selected leader to be eliminated by Israel and Trump. We are ultimately waiting for the Islamic Republic to be toppled soon.
Iran continues to fire back at Israel using cluster munitions that break apart in the air. At least one person was killed at this construction site near Tel Aviv's airport.
And this is one of the new threats from these Iranian missiles. You can see down here the shrapnel which has ripped through the metal casing of this escalator. It is that shrapnel coming from cluster munitions which is posing one of the gravest threats to the public.
Do you see any military facilities around you? The Iranians are targeting civilians.
But Israel and the US are also facing allegations of striking civilians, with video appearing to show it was an American Tomahawk missile that hit a girls' school in Iran, killing more than 160 people. The US is investigating.
Whatever the report shows, I'm willing to live with that report.
Standing by his decisions as Commander-in-Chief. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Jerusalem.
And there'll be more on the war in the Middle East tonight on 7:30 when Sarah Ferguson interviews the spokesperson for the Iranian Foreign Ministry, Ismail Baghai. Back home now, a second woman has raised concerns about the state government sharing medical information with journalists. She's calling for an apology as pressure piles on Labor to explain its approach.
After a series of surgery delays, Monica Wallstadt spoke out against the health system. What she didn't expect was how the government responded.
I'd like an apology.
In November, she stood beside now Liberal leader Ashton Hearn to share her story. Behind the scenes, the Health Minister's office provided journalists the list of her scheduled and cancelled procedures, including the medication she was taking.
Whenever there's a situation where particularly the opposition are going to raise issues in a media release and raise concerns about something, journalists will come to the government to fact check that information, and it's appropriate that the government answers those questions.
It doesn't give them the right. They should have approached me to get the consent.
The criticism kicking in the middle of an election campaign with the government already in damage control.
Chris made a bad call, a bad judgment.
That judgment after Bronwyn Patterson shared her partner's experience being ramped during his final moments. Mr Picton's office sending journalists a nearly 2-year-old email from a man they said was her partner. Not only did it not relate to his time ramped, but was from a different Stephen King.
Let's not use patients as political tools.
The government says it should respond to specific patient stories to ensure they're accurate. The opposition says it's Labor's public relations machine in overdrive. The question is where the line is in responding to patients who go public with their experience.
At the end of the day, someone has to make a judgment call. That's the nature of being a minister.
If we're elected, we'll be launching an investigation immediately to find out whether this is a pattern of behaviour.
Health again in the pre-election spotlight. Evelyn Manfield, ABC News.
And before voters head to the polls, Peter Malinauskas and Ashton Hearn will go head-to-head in the SA Press Club's Leaders Debate this Friday, moderated by Radio Adelaide's Rory McLaren. You can tune in on ABC TV and radio across South Australia and on streaming platforms. A multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the Premier, Peter Malinauskas, has been thrown out of court. The Supreme Court has found former MP Annabelle Digance had no reasonable basis for her claim the Premier led a malicious prosecution against her. Her lawyer has flagged she'll be appealing the judgment.
Another chapter closed in the long-winded saga between the state's Premier and former MP Annabelle Digance.
Naturally, at various points along the way, it hasn't been easy, but I've always done what I believe to be right, and this decision today, I think, in no small way validates it.
The Supreme Court has thrown out the $2.3 million lawsuit Ms Digance filed against Mr Malinauskas that claimed he had led a malicious prosecution. It relates to a case in 2021 when she and her husband, Greg Digance, were accused of blackmailing the then opposition leader. The charges were dropped in April 2023 when they entered an agreement to stay away from him. A judgment has now found there was no reason for Mr Malinauskas to be a party to her lawsuit, and that the decision to prosecute Ms Digance was made by police and the Department of Public Prosecutions, not the Premier. Auxiliary Justice Graham Dart said the charges against Ms Digance and her husband were discontinued because they entered an agreement, not because there was no reasonable prospect of a conviction. Ms Digance said she has instructed her legal team to appeal the decision. Auxiliary Justice Dart said Ms Digance is still able to pursue the complaints she made against SAPOL during her arrest in April 2021, including claims of trespass and false imprisonment. Eva Blandis, ABC News.
In a shock announcement, David Littleproud has revealed he's resigning as the leader of the Nationals, but will stay on in Parliament as the member for Maranoa. Here's National Affairs correspondent Jane Norman.
David Littleproud surprised his own colleagues, announcing that after 4 years in the job, he's stepping down as Nationals leader. Quite simply, he says he's run out of energy, but it's clear last year's devastating election defeat has taken its toll.
I'm buggered. I've had enough. To lead this great party would be the wrong thing for me to do.
It's been a tumultuous time on the Conservative side of politics. David Littleproud engineered 2 coalition splits and had a public falling out with former Liberal leader Susan Lee. So far, Senator Matt Canavan has confirmed he'll contest the leadership. Others are considering their options. Whoever gets the job will need to contend with the rise of One Nation and will face their first test with the upcoming Farrer by-election.
Jane Norman reporting there. The Queensland city of Bundaberg is in the grip of an emergency tonight as the Burnett River reaches a major flood level. Close to 300 homes are at risk of inundation when the river peaks overnight.
Residents ordered to evacuate as the Burnett River swallows streets, homes and businesses.
They have been warned that they need to leave immediately.
Boats and pontoons pulled from their moorings, cars submerged as locals make last-minute preparations, with the north set to be cut off for several days.
When the 2010 flood hit, this house actually went under.
We've been through it a few times, and if there's anything under the house, you're sort of prepared to lose that.
We can just get a car and drive, but where are we going to put the chook?
As the community waits out the overnight peak, there's some relief. The water won't reach the height of the 2010 floods, but authorities say there'll still be heartbreaking consequences if the water reaches 7.5 metres, as businesses on the south side brace for impact. Fridges and freezers emptied, trying to save perishable goods.
We've just cleared out everything out of every single shed, shop, freezer.
The peak in both Gayndah and Mundubbera was just below impacting homes, which was really, a blessing for that community. That won't be the case here in Bundaberg.
Upstream, the region's troubled Paradise Dam, which had its capacity lowered and walls reinforced to make it safe, faces its first test. It's currently at double its capacity.
There's no issues with the structure of the dam. It is, from all the information we've got, it is safe at the moment.
The threat has passed for Gayndah and Mundubra, with locals grateful it wasn't worse. Lucy Lorem, ABC News, Bundaberg.
The Northern Territory's major top-end towns of Darwin and Katherine are under a boil water alert following major flooding across the region. More than 100,000 Darwin residents have been told to conserve water after pumps stalled at the city's main dam, which is sitting at more than 110% capacity. Further south, Katherine residents have been boiling their drinking water for days as they deal with an extensive flood cleanup. Authorities say the situation is unprecedented and it's unclear how long it will take to fix it. A Perth court has heard allegations former Australian rules footballer Barry Cable sexually abused a young girl in the late 1960s. The woman, now in her 60s, claims to have been around 10 years old at the time of the alleged offending. Barry Cable denies the allegations.
Barry Cable was a decorated Australian rules footballer in the 60s and 70s.
Across to Cable, a straight shot's needed.
It's during this time the now 82-year-old is accused of sexually abusing a young girl. In her opening statement, Crown Prosecutor Kim Jennings told the Perth District Court Mr Cable was very well known and well liked, but that behind that spotlight there was a dark side. The alleged victim, who lived in an orphanage as a child, told the court she stayed with Mr Cable and his wife for a few weeks during the late 1960s, alleging the sexual abuse happened on several occasions. But Mr Cable's lawyer, Tom Percy, told the court the allegations were false, saying there were no records showing this woman had been absent from the orphanage for a period of weeks. He suggested there was a financial motive for her allegations because they emerged in 2023, around the time a judge found he had sexually abused a different girl in a civil trial, telling the woman she wanted to cash in too, to which she replied, "No, I did not." Asked why she hadn't told anyone about the alleged abuse at the time, the woman told the court, "Because he told me no one would believe me because he was Barry Cable." The judge-alone trial also heard evidence from the woman who won the civil case against Barry Cable. She described multiple instances of sexual assault against her. The trial is also set to hear from 2 more women. The prosecution arguing this shows a tendency for Barry Cable to be sexually attracted to young underage girls and to act upon that sexual interest. Rhiannon Shine, ABC News, Perth.
And if you or someone you know needs help, please contact 1-800-RESPECT by phone or their website. To finance now, and the local share price bounced back today as the oil price fell back sharply. Here's Alan Kohler.
The oil price had already fallen below $100 a barrel when President Trump rang a reporter from CBS News. She immediately posted her scoop on X at 6:15 this morning, our time, saying he had told her the war is very complete, pretty much, and he's thinking about taking over the Straits of Hormuz, whatever that might mean. The oil price promptly dropped to $85. The news conference a couple of hours later didn't take things much further, even though he foreshadowed the removal of sanctions to get oil flowing. But in general, markets are feeling much better about things today than they were yesterday. But it really is a day-by-day proposition. The oil price is still about $25 above where it was before the United States and Israel started bombing Iran and the Persian Gulf slammed shut, while gold and silver went up today. The share market had a bit of a bounce, with investors buying miners and banks and selling oil and gas stocks. The US market rose last night, as did Japanese and Korean stocks today. And the Aussie dollar moved a bit higher against the US dollar but stayed steady against the euro. Now, the government might be wishing Australia taxed its LNG exports as much as the royalties on iron ore, and better still, coal. Liquid natural gas prices are soaring, but we only get 2% of that on top of the company tax, compared with 7% for iron ore and 13% for coal. And finally, the Roy Morgan ANZ Consumer Sentiment Survey today showed that, unsurprisingly, inflation expectations have surged. This is what the Reserve Bank is worried about. And if interest rates go up next Tuesday, or more likely in May, this will be why. And that's finance.
To sport now, and both the Crows and Port Adelaide have injury concerns leading into their round 1 AFL matches. Adelaide will face the Magpies on Saturday night and has to decide how many players it brings off a long injury list after what's been a cursed pre-season.
After another gruelling summer, the gloves are set to finally come off.
Been a long pre-season, been a really enjoyable one, and obviously now we get to crack into round 1.
Everyone's itching at the bit to get going, so it'll be exciting Saturday night.
He'd be especially excited if brother Toby finally makes his AFL debut.
If it is to be that he does play, it'll be quite a special moment for obviously himself, but you know, our family as well. It's something that you probably dream of growing up, you know, playing in the backyard with your brother.
The Crows don't think the Pies have an edge, despite already opening their season with a win over the Saints. But Matthew Nix will need to assess how many injured players, including Thilthorpe, Archie and Peatling, can safely last the full game. At Alberton, Jack Lukosius is the big query as he tries to return from injury for Sunday's clash with the Roos. Plenty has changed since last year, with Josh Carr taking the reins in a reshaped footy department. Miles Bergman will also be a key addition to the midfield.
Got great speed, great power, can play different roles in that midfield or different positions as well.
Whether Dante Vicentini leads the ruck and who of Whitlock or Lord plays up forward are among the selection dilemmas. Former Port assistant coach Michael Voss is already feeling the pressure after Carlton's opening round flogging by the Swans. The club in early damage control after former captain Sam Docherty criticised its performance.
I don't spend a hell of a lot of time focusing or sharing what others say about us. What I do is reinforce the behaviours we need. And when things get tough, we stick together.
The Blues face Richmond on Thursday night. Matthew Smith, ABC News.
6-time gold medalist Michael Milton has made an emotional return to the Winter Paralympics in Italy after an absence of 2 decades. The 52-year-old competed in the Super G standing event less than a month after surgery on a fractured leg. Australia's most decorated Winter Paralympian was disappointed to finish 23rd in his comeback race.
Certainly not the way I want to be back. It's a super tough race. It's a challenging hill, coming back from injury, and I think in my head it was probably the toughest race I've ever done.
The Matildas will study footage of the North Korean team ahead of Friday's Women's Asian Cup quarter-final in Perth. North Korea finished second in its group after a controversial 2-1 loss to China in Parramatta. A Chinese goal that was initially disallowed for offside was awarded after a video review. The North Koreans refused to play the remainder of the first half but returned for the second half. Well, let's take a look at South Australia's weather now, but first, tonight's photo shows Tot Hill Range near Brady Creek in the state's mid-north and was sent in to us by Harvey Neal. Well, there was plenty of sunshine across Adelaide today. In the city, it reached 33 degrees around 5 o'clock this afternoon after a low of 13.7. It was a mainly fine day right around the state. Nullarbor recorded the highest temperature with a top of 37.4 degrees. It reached 36 degrees in Ceduna and 30 in Mount Gambier. A cloud band brought showers and storms for WA's south and the Bight. Cloud over the northern tropics with a trough and monsoonal winds is generating rain and thunderstorms. That activity will continue tomorrow. Meanwhile, high pressure ridges will direct showers into eastern Queensland, New South Wales and WA south. Interstate, a sunny 34 degrees for Alice Springs, 30 in Brisbane and Canberra, rain and 21 for Hobart. Back home, there's a chance of a brief afternoon shower in the far northeast corner, a top of 34 degrees in Woomera and 27 degrees for Whyalla. Further afield, there'll be some isolated showers developing about the southern and far western coasts, a top of 23 degrees in Narracourt. A flood warning remains in place for South Australia's inland rivers, and a current strong wind warning for the far west coast will continue tomorrow and extend into several other districts. It'll be partly cloudy in Adelaide tomorrow, a top of 26 degrees in the city, down to 19 degrees overnight. On the waters, northerly winds to 15 knots, shifting southerly to 20 knots in the early afternoon, with seas increasing to 1.5 metres. Sunrise at 7:10 with sunset just after 20 to 8. And looking further ahead, 23 degrees on Thursday, 29 over the weekend, a shower or two on Monday with 30 degrees, and then partly cloudy with 31 this time next week. And that's all the news to now. Thanks very much for your company. 7:30 is up next.